Welcome to Liège, Bastogne, Liège, one of the oldest and most storied races on the race calendar, and it is also one of the 5 Monument Classics. So just like the Tour of Flanders in the previous race, very high stakes in this race. 850 points instead of the usual 500 for winning Liège, Bastogne, Liège. The race situation with 83 kilometers to ride is 5 breakaways who leave the peloton by around 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And those leaders are Victor Petruskevicius, Ludwig Kona, Ishikawa Kitetsu, Supajok Charativat, and Emmerich Alexander. So a lot of sprinters have gotten into that group. None of them are very good climbers. So for once, a breakaway not really a threat to steal the race away from the peloton. The early attacks have had a lot of success this season, more than we would expect, and in 2 of those races, the early breakaways actually won the bike race. It was the Trofeo Laigueglia with Carlos Nello, who took off at the start of the race and was never caught, and then that magnificent ride in Paris-Roubaix, where Jamal Safari took off with 140 kilometers to ride and ended up beating all the big favorites. Some near misses as well in terms of those breakaways, like in Strada Bianca. But not this time in Liège, Bastogne, Liège. We're into the climbing part of the course now. Many hills between here and the finish, but the course seems tailor-made for Kyoto and Ibai Leida. They are the big favorites today, and they are riding like it. They've done most of the work in the peloton since the start of the race. And this is a huge opportunity for Kyoto to take an unassailable lead in the VeloTour. It's a big drama in the team standings in recent races. Kyoto were large and in charge as they've been all season after the Giro d'Italia, but then Hamburg Cyclassics and Paris-Tour saw a big shift because Valnor and AlphaTauri went ahead of Kyoto in the standings, and Valnor became the leader after Paris-Tour. But then we had the Tour of Flanders, and the script flipped once again, and now Kyoto leads AlphaTauri by 400 points and Valnor by close to 1,000. And if Ibai Leida were to win this race, I don't think anyone has a chance of catching Kyoto this season. So this is a high pressure situation for AlphaTauri. They do have some riders who can make a big result happen, namely Evgeny Balashkov and Luis Sancho. So Dzak probably watching with great interest. He's the manager of the AlphaTauri team. If Kyoto get the result there after in this race, the season might just be over. Of course, not literally, but figuratively, still a few races left. But the next race is the Benelux Tour, and I imagine that a lot of Kyoto riders will think they can win that race. Verhoeven, Teuton, Kalas, of course, perfect for those types of riders. It's a stage race without any mountains, and it has some cobblestones, which is bad news for the likes of Valnor. But Valnor have sent Jeroen Leuyken up the road back here in Liège, Bastogne, Liège with Evgeny Balashkov, Jean-Marie Caillou, and Laura Duverne. Katarina Beltran of Kyoto has signed with doing the chase down. The breakaway of sprinters still surviving. They lost Supajok Charativat, who has since been caught and dropped, but the 4 others still clinging to a very slim lead. This advanced chase group featuring Jeroen Leuyken is not really pulling out a big gap. They're about to start the Col du Rosier, the longest climb on the course, but it only averages 6% gradient. We'll have some steeper ones later in the race. I wonder what's going through the mind of Evgeny Balashkov, because on one hand, AlphaTauri do need to beat Kyoto in this race, but is attacking this far from the finish really the right choice, especially you ought to be the team leader in this race. Kyoto has brought the move back with Katarina Beltran, so I think Balashkov wants to save himself for later in the race. Meanwhile, the remnants of the breakaway attacking each other, and they're all about on the same level today, but they've all been caught by the main field. So no silly breakaway is going to steal the race in Liège, Bastogne, Liège. It'll be a clash of the big teams. Kyoto resuming control, 5 riders at the front of the race here to set the pace. Actually, I think the 5th rider in that line is Ibai Leida. He is the protected rider. We should see a lot of attacks between here and the finish. All of the opportunists and aggressive bike riders will want to steal the race away. because although it's a good reduced group sprint type of race for the likes of Leida and Matsuoda, there's enough steep terrain for an opportunistic rider, someone like Rodolfo Lucci or even Luis Sancho, to get a small gap and take it all the way to the finish. So we're heading down the Col du Maquisard here. Rather, the Col du Rosier will start the Col du Maquisard next in a few kilometers' time. But the two big obstacles left on the course are the Côte de la Redoute, which comes after the Maquisard, and then the Côte de la Roche-au-Faucon, which is the last steep climb on the course. We're getting another attack by Jean-Marie Caillou. He's been very aggressive in the recent classics. Very unexpected for this type of rider, but after winning the Giro, he seems to be on cloud 9 in terms of his confidence. Euskaltel are a team without real options for the hilly classics. Their only chance is to send moves like this up the road and try and use their enduring qualities in the climbs to get away from the pack. But I don't think the climbs are hard enough for that to happen. Rico Rudiger and Wilmer Rodriguez should still be in that peloton, so we'll see if they try something later in the race. Euskaltel really struggled in the early hilly classics, but after winning the Giro and going all the way up to 4th place in the team standings, they might be thinking that if they get aggressive, they have a real chance of defending that place all the way to the end of the VeloTour. And if they repeat their Giro performance in the Tour de France, they could have their sights set on Valnoor's 3rd place position. So Euskaltel showing some life, although in the Tour of Flanders they didn't perform well as a team. Duverne is dropped from this group in the meantime. That is a surprise. She's a strong rider. Must not have good luck today. Sometimes it happens. You just wake up and your body's not quite right. The other three though, in Sengamana, Caillou, and Moikin, these are your race leaders. They have a minute's gap over the peloton. A decent advantage and a decently strong group. They've gone over the Maquisard and they're approaching the Côte de la Redoute, a very famous climb on the course. Of course, a lot of hills and mountains much harder than this, but many stories have been written on this climb in Liège, Bastogne, Liège. Most recently with Remco Evenepoel, the prodigy Belgian rider who won this race on home roads a year ago. The first time they got a home victory in that race in a very long time. He launched a searing move over the Redoute, and look at the crowds now. They know this is the best place to be on the course. Caillou leads them on. The best stage race rider in the VeloTour, now leading one of the Monument Classics. Just like that, they've gone up and over the climb. We'll see what happens in the peloton now. Is this the time for someone to launch an attack? The answer is no. It's AlphaTauri who want to send a rider to control the tempo. Adrian Bernard this time. The next climb is the Côte des Forges, a few kilometers away. There's still a couple of rolling little hills between that one. And it seems some gaps have formed over the Redoute. Sismic is trying to chase back on with some riders here. Germuni, the sprinter, is still here for Valnoor. Now things could get really interesting if this large group somehow comes all the way to the finish, which is not impossible in Liège, Bastogne, Liège. So Sofiane Germuni would be a big threat to win that sprint, because I don't think it's impossible he could get there. And you see other teams nervous at the fact this group is still very large with under 30 Ks to ride. Skavgo tried an attack, I think Hackett just tried to move there. But still altogether 49 riders in this group. And if you're one of the lesser sprinters, if you're a rider like Harold Skavgo or Rodolfo Lucci or Ileana Pavlova, you need to get rid of these sprinters. You won't have any chance at all, let alone against the likes of Eli Leida. But if Sofiane Germuni and Miroslav Kostra are at the end of the race, that'll pretty much be a wrap. On to the Côte de Forge now, and here come some attacks. It's Matsuoda, Egon Callas, and a Jupiler rider, probably Harold Skavgo here. In between here and the finish, I think a lot of riders are going to try their luck. Here comes Jeff Cooper. Jonathan Kaiser, one of the Natalia riders. And a gap has formed, so 10 riders have escaped from the peloton. Caillou and Zionis trying to chase it down. And once again, it's come back together. So they'll descend a little hill here, and then it's onto the Côte de la Roche au Faucon, the final climb of Liège Bastogne Liège, 20 kilometers to ride, and this is a massive group for this point in the race. 42 riders are still here, including the big favorite VeloTour, and I reckon a number of sprinters as well. With so many riders still here, I don't think anyone's going to get away solo at this point. There's just way too much firepower. You have to wait and see, and for some riders, their only chance of winning is trying a solo attack. We're onto the climb now, this one the steepest in the race. Where is VeloTour? Because he needs to be in good position. I think he's one of those front riders for Kyoto. Here comes Jamal Safari, the first to try slug. There's an Altalia rider, it's Kelvin Moore. AlphaTauri bridging the gap with Balashkov. There is Lida. Tense moments here as we see if any gaps will form. Safari trying to keep things together here. Looks like he has. It's an all-out effort here on the Côte de la Roche au Faucon. Riders scrambling to get across the gap here. I think that's Kelvin Moore now resuming control. Any counterattacks. That is Pavlova with Lida and Lucci. Lucci sat up. Lida counters. I think that's Lucci in his wheel. Yevgeny Balashkov, probably Harold Skobgo, and a few other riders have got in here as well. Navarro scrambling to get across with Kaiser and Pavlova. 10Ks to go, a small gap is formed, but look at the chase behind. Well, they still have plenty in the legs to bring this back. It looks like 17 riders are here, and Harold Skobgo's tried an opportunistic move, and this is the place to do it. On this little plateau, and then you have a twisting descent, and just a couple flat kilometers to the finish. Any hesitation by the main field and Skobgo could take the race. Jupiler have not won a race all season, and Skobgo trying to do something about that right now. The gap is still small, just 13 seconds. Look at this chase down, it's a Kyoto rider. It's Lida himself who's trying to pull this back. He's the big favorite to win the race, but no one else is going to chase. They're not going to help him. They know he's the big favorite. He's sabotaging his own chances just to bring back the Skobgo, so he has any chance at all of winning the bike race. We're going to turn right, 2Ks to go. Skobgo clinging to a very slim lead, and they've sat up. Lida doesn't want to chase anymore. He wants to turn it over to someone else. That could be the window Skobgo needs. They're going to sprint it out from behind, but they will not catch Harold Skobgo, and Jupiler finally gets in the winner's column. Balashkov in second place for AlphaTauri. That is a big result for that team, because Lida was only in 6th. So AlphaTauri strike back in some fashion at least. They will outscore Kyoto, but the real story is Harold Skobgo, who's been an underrated rider in the VeloTour. He's had some decent results all season. He was up there in the Amstel Gold Race, and now he's taken a magnificent win in Liège Bastogne Liège. An opportunistic move. He just took his chance, went all out to the finish, and VeloTour realized he had no friends back in the peloton. And for AlphaTauri, it was a messy race, not much they could do to control the affairs and launch big attacks, but in the end, Balashkov took that sprint for second place, and that was just what they needed to remain in contention for the team trophy. So your top riders in Liège Bastogne Liège, starting with Harold Skobgo with his solo attack over the Côte de la Roche au Faucon. Just when things came back together, he surprised everyone and survived by 11 seconds at the finish line. In second place, Yevgeny Balashkov. Third was Giovanni Canali of Doimo. Rico Rudiger gets fourth place for Euskaltel. That is a surprise, not known for his sprinting. Lars Evensen fifth for Sismic. Then VeloTour, Ileana Pavlova, Rodolfo Lucci, Dimitris Jonas, and Jonathan Kaiser. A few other Kyoto riders in there in the top 20, but the 680 points scored by Yevgeny Balashkov will trump all of that. So once again, the team standings will change, but in what fashion? We'll look at them now, and Kyoto is still the leader, but their lead has been reduced, around halved if I had to guess. just 200 points ahead of AlphaTauri. Valnor had a poor race today, no one really up there in the top 10, so they are slipping away from the top places, so they're now in 3rd. In fact, they've lost ground to Euskaltel Euskadi, so that battle for 3rd place could get interesting and not the way we expected, because Euskaltel is catching up. Doimo sending the standings as well, they're now up to 7th place. They've had a decent run the last few races, top 5s in Hamburg and Paris Tour, and they've got 2 riders in the top 10 here in Liège. So the team standings are still close thanks to AlphaTauri striking back, but the Benelux Tour is dangerous territory for the rest of the VeloTour, because that race is tailor-made for Kyoto to completely dominate in the same way they did in Tirreno Adriatico. So we'll see if a surprise is in store or if Kyoto will stamp their authority on the rest of the race. After the Benelux Tour, we have some hilly classics, including the monument Io Lombardia, the final monument of the season, and then the finale of the Tour de France, where the destiny of the VeloTour will be decided. So as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.